Hello. This paper is titled Historicizing Diaspora, State Building, Ethnic Cleansing and Migration in the 20th Century. As the title probably suggests, this paper does not exactly talk about diasporas, but it talks about the structural context within which some of the mass migrations of the 20th century have taken place. And that structural context is the process of modern state building. The principal argument of this paper is that 20th century state building projects were created towards realizing a utopian state characterized singularly by ethnic homogenization, meaning that the sovereign territory of the nation state must be ethnically homogeneous, in other words, devoid of cultural differences. This obsession with creating a utopian state of social perfection led modern states to adopt policies of assimilation, exclusion, or extermination to deal with their minorities, all of which ultimately led to ethnically cleansed socio-political spaces. Three aspects of state building. Since there is a constraint on time, I will just deal with three principal aspects of state building that I identify as important for bringing about mass migrations in the 20th century. First is the contradiction between sovereignty and self-determination. Sovereignty, as we all know, was enshrined in 1648 in the Treaty of Westphalia. It establishes the state as the ultimate political system, which also has the highest law-making and law-enforcing authority in the international system. Consequently, we see that in the international system, all states try to protect and promote state sovereignty by coinciding the territory with a unified government. But the problem arises because following the First World War, in the Paris Peace Conference, another contradictory notion was also established, that of self-determination, whereby minorities, ethnic and national minority groups, had the legal right to aspire to statehood and become nations in the sovereign sense. So on the one hand, you have sovereignty, which asserts the territorial inviolability of the state. And on the other hand, you have self-determination, which grants legal rights to the aspirations of minorities. This tension between the institution of sovereignty and the notion of self-determination, I think, is one of the chief causes in international relations, in the international state system, why we are not able to protect minorities. The second is the presence of centralized bureaucracy. Now, if we consider that sovereignty is the institution that legitimizes why states pursue whatever policies they pursue against minorities, it is the centralized bureaucracy of the state which acts as agents of carrying out these policies. So the notion that we have that discrimination just happens, it is probably not so. There are agents who think through it, who do it. So in a nationalizing state, nationalizing meaning where the state is trying to build a national identity, and more or less all states are trying to do it, the bureaucracy, the ruling elite, try to institutionalize the demarcation between those they consider as the core group, the dominant group, the people who, according to them, are the legitimate owners of the state, and the other non-dominant groups, people who, to a greater or a lesser extent, are unwanted for the scheme of things. So the ruling elites pursue policies which sooner or later are aimed at transforming demographically the composition of the state. Two policies in particular come up recurrently in debates on migration and diasporas. One is policies of assimilation for minorities that are deemed fit for assimilation, and the other is the other three policies that you can read for minorities not deemed fit for assimilation. Assimilation for minorities that are considered worthy of, making part of the state, can come about in three ways: either voluntarily, that the minorities themselves want to be a part of the society; it can come about through, soft coercion, that the state encourages commingling of ethnic communities, or it can come about forcefully through means of violence on the part of the state. For minorities that are not considered fit for assimilation, for example, like the Jews in Tsarist Russia, or you would have several other examples, 3 policies may be used. I mean, these are not either or, they are most likely in chronology. Segregation is aimed at reducing the interaction between groups. The idea is to make ethnic divisions seem natural and self-evident. Second is legalization. It refers to using laws to discriminate, for example, banning citizenship rights or relegating certain ethnic groups to second-class citizens, or other forms of legal and bureaucratic discrimination. And third is discrimination, the most institutionalized form in this continuum, that may come about through creation of separate administrative areas that conform to the presumed notions of ethnic boundaries, or creation of separate confessional systems, discrimination in the employment sector, suppression of cultural expression, ban on policies against languages, and so forth. Thus, coming back to the point that the bureaucracy of the modern state, and the idea of bureaucracy also has its roots in 19th century, which I think the history we are all familiar with, like the French idea of the centralized state and so on. So the bureaucracy is the agent for carrying out discriminatory processes against policies against minorities. Finally, the third aspect, ethnic cleansing. I'll just have a look here. So the modern state, for the first time, links the notion of political legitimacy with ethnic solidarity. I mean, it is very easy to think that there is something called ethnic nationalism, which is not, I mean, civic nationalism. But this critique, I mean, inspired from literature in international relations, it draws from criticism of state building to say that it is the state which links this political legitimacy with ethnic solidarity. Once these two things are linked, ethnic differences become a natural cause of discrimination by the state, by virtue of doing nothing for it, I mean, in simpler language. The policies that we have named so far, banning of citizenship rights, ghettoization, for example, resettlement of population within the territory, like happened extensively in Soviet Union, deportation, mass deportations, exchange of populations as happened after the Balkan Wars, and genocide as well. All these can therefore be seen as ways of ethnic cleansing. In other words, ethnic cleansing should not be thought of as an extreme point in the continuum on radicalized discourses and practices. It is probably one of the standardized tools of state building. Ethnic cleansing requires a rationally thought out plan. It doesn't happen because of sudden outbursts of hatred or just as a byproduct of conflict. Ethnic cleansing requires a rationally thought out plan and the rational means to execute it, such as resources, money, or agents like bureaucracy. The modern state not only owns these resources of carrying out ethnic cleansing, but going back to the first argument, its obsession with creating a utopian state of social perfection motivates it to use ethnic cleansing as a tool as and when it deems correct. Thank you. That's it.